some of your experiences in rehab, because
Yeah.
you stayed,
Yes.
and you heard this other side that made more sense to you, and I guess really just like you said, it resonated more with you. Like, that's more of my truth.
Mhm.
But you stayed in rehab, and what did you learn, and what did they feed you, and what was your experience there that then has obviously stuck with you all these years, that has made you want to do what you're doing now? Tell us
So
about
when
that
I,
experience.
the first 37 days of my treatment were in a hospital setting. It was an actual rehab hospital, what people consider the traditional rehab setting. And when I was there, changing your diet was not an option, right? They had dietitians there that teach the ADA standard diet, that ate everything in moderation is how you're healthy, that meat, eggs, and dairy should be on every single plate, and that they have the My Plate thing that you put it on, and that whole thing. And and so there I was. There was nothing I could really do in terms of changing my diet. I tried to eat more plants when I could. I ate oatmeal for breakfast because they served oatmeal, but it was not going to be an opportunity for me to adopt a plant-based diet. But when I moved into sober living, which is where I would spend the next 10 months, and a sober living facility is your halfway house. It's where I went and lived with about 12 other guys between ages of 20 and 40, who were also in the attempts of either early stage recovery, had just checked out of rehab, or were skipping the rehab situation because either they couldn't afford it or for whatever reason. And I walk in, and in this sober living facility, they say, healthy eating, you tell us what you need. And I go into the kitchen and I look in the pantry, and it was like they had a 12-year-old who had been watching nothing but Nickelodeon commercials from the 90s stocking the cabinets. I mean, it was Fruity Pebbles, it was Eggo waffles, it was Doritos, it was bologna. I mean, it was, and I don't mean that in the pejorative sense. I mean, literally, they had bologna in the fridge, and I just had this profound understanding that, what's the point of being sober if I can't recover? And that mindset created this complete distinction between the two for me, right? What am I seeking? Am I seeking sobriety? Well, sobriety just asks me not to use. Okay, that's an abstinence-based ideology of abstain from a substance, make substance the enemy, and then abstain from it for the rest of your life, identify myself as having a problem with this substance, and whatever else happens. Or I could seek recovery, which for me, I identified as the willingness and the resilience to face these dark parts of myself that I believed were unlovable, move through them with grace and with positive change, and learn that the shame that I felt for these experiences I was having wasn't because there was anything unlovable about me. It was because at some point in my life, I bought into somebody's bullshit story that there were parts of myself that were unlovable, right? And I hadn't learned to love. And it was going to be a process of reconnecting to those meaningful bonds of self, of purpose, of my body, of what it does for me, not necessarily what it looks like. And I walked up to the house manager, because at this place, the house manager takes a list of what you want at the grocery store, and then they send someone to go get it and they bring it back. They do a grocery shop once a week. And you can't write this any better. I walk up to the house manager, whose last name is literally Hamburger, and ask him to get me all of these foods. And there wasn't a lot that I knew that I enjoyed at the time. There was a few things. It was oatmeal. I've been eating oatmeal every morning for the last 8 years. It was black beans and broccoli and fruit, and it was oil-free sauces and things like that. And that was basically the basis of my diet. And I noticed this experience of getting up every single morning and being really upset about what I was having to do, right? That I didn't know why it couldn't simply be a matter of intellect and will, why I couldn't just want to do these things, know how to do it, and that's it, end of story. Like, my life just gets better. What else is going on underneath the surface? And as I talked in episode 2, I got the opportunity to hear the TED Talk by Doug Lisle called The Pleasure Trap, which helped me to understand the biological mechanisms that compel us to seek any behavior that elicits a higher than normal dopamine response, because our body interprets that response as an indication of biological success, that whatever we've just done has just increased our statistical likelihood of gene survival. And that again helped me remove the shame, that the reason why I was getting up and I was looking at the cabinet, seeing oatmeal and wanted to choose something else wasn't because I was broken. It wasn't because there was anything wrong with me whatsoever. It's because my body was responding exactly the way it was supposed to, given how I'd been living my life, given the environment that I had created for myself. And it asked me to be comfortable being uncomfortable, was the basis of it all. To be comfortable being uncomfortable enough to make the choice that was in alignment with what I was trying to create for myself. And the difference between the way I approach it and the way that I see a lot of the health movement approach change is that you could look at me and say, oh, he's 350 pounds, he had diabetes and heart disease, and he nearly died from substance abuse. That's why he's making this change. That's why he's willing to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And it brings me back to that, the way that I viewed myself when I was in the midst of my addiction was hate the stuff enough about myself to change, right? Hate myself, hate my life enough. And I said, you know what, I'm just done. I'm done using hate as a motivator. And so, yeah, I was 350 pounds. I didn't want to be. Yeah, I had diabetes and heart disease and erectile dysfunction. I didn't want those, and I nearly died. And I can tell you that I know for certain after nearly dying that it was not something I wanted to do. Why? What was it about my life that was meaningful enough, that I loved enough? What was it about myself that was meaningful enough and that I loved enough, that I was going to be willing to do whatever it takes to have the self-compassion, have the resiliency, have the grace to move through it in order to reconnect to those meaningful bonds in life, those loving bonds that make me want to show up today and be in pain if necessary, to show up and connect to the people that matter to me most. Because I'm going to tell you, no matter what anybody is doing, if they're trying to change something about their life, the reason is love. And they may not identify that, but it's always love. It always comes back to that. Negative consequences have never motivated anybody to change their life. Negative consequences highlight a meaningful bond in life that is being threatened. And it is that meaningful bond in life, that is why anybody changes anything about their life or does something that they already do better.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that instead of running away from the bad, you're moving towards the good. That was your motivation.
Loving myself into a positive situation. And as a result of practicing these things while also adopting a plant-based diet, I not only reversed the diseases, I got off all the psych meds. And I said, you know what, this is interesting because here I'm going through recovery, the same recovery with 12, 15 other people. And at the end of the 10 months that I was there, these people were they're doing the best they could. They wanted recovery as much as I did. And everything they were doing was everything they were asked of them. And they were either on the same medication, but higher dosages. They were either on more medications. They had possibly gained weight. They hadn't lost weight. They weren't healthier than the day they got in. They were sober. Yes, they were sober. But what could it literally be the diet that was such an X factor that allowed this massive gap in the journey that we both took together? And so I said, what's the research say? Well, there isn't any. There's never been a single study ever done investigating the effects of any diet on early addiction recovery outcomes. And I thought, what a shame, because there are studies that show the effects of abstinence. We know what happens when someone checks into treatment and they abstain from substance abuse for 28 days. We know the biochemical effects it has on the brain. We know the biochemical effects it has on the body. We know the emotional response that it has. We know the effects that exercise has on it. We studied it. We know the effects that different therapy modalities has on it. But the one thing we've never investigated is one of the most controlled factors in all of treatment. It's what you eat, when you eat, and how much you eat. Every single rehab facility serves the same food to everybody at the exact same time, 3 times a day. And we've never investigated the effects of what we put into our body as we're trying to recover from the damaging effects of what we put into our body. It blew my mind. And I decided that was going to be what I wanted to do, was to bring this knowledge to the world. That was 5 years ago. And I spent the next 5 years going back to school, working in different treatment centers, developing programs, using plant-based nutrition, until I felt confident enough that that's what I wanted to do. And that's where we are right now. So it's been I can't say it was one specific thing, but what I learned is that there is right now, we have a situation in the United States or in the world, okay, that Mental and substance abuse disorders are the leading cause of years lived with disability worldwide, right? Each year, approximately 3.3 million people die from alcohol and substance abuse, and 31 million people struggle with substance abuse disorders worldwide. And we know that the recidivism rate of treatment is 70%. What that means is that 70% of people who check in for treatment today will be back in treatment within 1 year. And so I'm not saying the system is broken, but there is a glaring incomplete factor to it. It's just incomplete. We don't have enough knowledge. And now we're seeing, because the study's been running for 11 months, we're seeing that there's a real impact that diet has on your early addiction recovering factors and how it can strengthen, it can help or hinder an individual in recovery.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.